The morning session, how was it? So what is your general understanding? I hope you have got the basic ideas about what is asset management. So as the title suggests, that essentially I shall be covering the strategic view, and I will very quickly come to what I mean by the strategic view. See, first of all, that if you look at what is asset management, that definition, you can see that I was trying to tell you in the morning that essentially it is trying to get an integrated view, a total view. So something like a car, right from the beginning, what are the processes that would actually it would go through? For example, operating, maintaining, upgrading, disposing, and in between many other states that it goes, and depends on that particular state that it has, a particular asset is having. You can actually work out what is the specific utility of that particular asset. Say for example, suppose a particular shop floor, you have a machine. That particular machine is operating for many years and it's producing quality goods, but it's not that quick. It's alright. Suppose you want something like 30 parts per hour, and this particular machine is giving only 10 parts or even 5 parts per hour. It's alright. Now you have purchased a machine which is new, quick and very fast. For example, it can perhaps deliver something like 30 units per hour. So your demand is 30 units per hour, and these 30 units per hour it is actually producing, the new machine. So what you do with the old machine? Now comes the asset management. You ask yourself that virtually that old machine has already served its purpose, and perhaps it requires very little maintenance to run it. It's alright. Now question is that although you need 30 per hour, there may be some fluctuations. Sometimes you need a little more, and even the new machine, due to some maintenance problem, it may be actually giving something like 26, 27 or even 25 per hour. It's alright. So this gap can be filled up by this old machine. It's alright. It is slow, it is not that good, but it does give quality product, although at a slow rate, and since its usable life is almost over, it doesn't really add to much cost for its operation. So you may find out true asset management may require a type of maintenance for this old machine as well, and perhaps utilize it for the benefit of the company. A secondary decision could be basically write off the old machine, right? You may decide that, look here, my production requirement is 30, I have a new machine which is not 30 but it can produce up to 40. So the old machine is of no use. So idea is dispose it off. Whatever salvage value we get, that's the gain. It's alright. So that's about the basic idea. But again, there are tangible assets like equipment and machines, and intangible assets such as software or goodwill. So you can see that the goals are different. When you are running an equipment or you are running a machine, the goal is to achieve the maximum possible returns, whereas for intangible, the idea is the best possible service. Right? So for service, things are slightly different. Say for example, something like a software. How do you calculate the value of a software? It's alright. But is it that the software does not need maintenance? It also needs maintenance. But its maintenance is very different from the way an equipment is maintained. See, every equipment is a new thing, whereas every copy of the software is not a new thing. Right? So when you talk about software maintenance, then this maintenance has to be seen in a slightly different manner. It's alright. Basically, how quickly you can extract the design on which the software is developed. So therefore, it is very important that when you develop the software, you also look at that whether this development process keeps the design intact. Like see, in old days, people used to write software where there were no discipline of how you name the variables, no discipline how you write the code. So a new person comes, he cannot decipher which portion of the code does exactly what. So these software could not be maintained. If the original developers forgets, or the original developer retires or goes away, then this software cannot be maintained. Even one new functionality if you have to add or delete or modify, you cannot do it. But we know that organizations are changing all the time, is it not? The needs are changing. Suppose today the DA is 90%, tomorrow DA is 100%. Moment DA becomes 100%, it may be merged with the basic. So you see, the old program will not work as it is, because now some portion of the DA is merged with the basic, another portion of DA is coming in. So calculations are slightly different. Now the question is, if this was not foreseen in the original program, then you need a little bit of change in the program. But if the program cannot be touched, right, we do not know what is inside the code, we cannot do it. So what is the cost to the company? It's a tremendous amount of cost. Because now the old program cannot be touched, that means you have to write a new program from scratch, which is very costly, is it not? So look here, this is where the asset management comes in. That means if we think the software is an asset, then what steps have we taken to manage that software in the best possible manner? Is that right? That we should realize, and that we should utilize also at the right moment. That is the idea. Now coming to other kind of things, say for example, as I can give an example, like we can have financial asset management, enterprise asset management, physical and infrastructure asset management, and those sort of things. Now mainly our focus will be here, that is the physical and infrastructure asset management, and these are basically, most of these items are something like equipment, something like machines, something like facilities, physical facilities, those sort of things. That is where we are going to concentrate. Now look, this is the complete life cycle I have given here, starting from design to construction to commissioning to operating, maintaining, repairing, modifying, replacing, and finally decommissioning and disposal. These are the steps in the life cycle of an asset, and at every stage the need of what is an asset management activity and what we want from that given asset has to be assessed. Is that right? So this is about broad introduction. Now let's get to the actual thing. The actual thing is that the physical asset management, I told about those infrastructure, equipment, machines and all those things. So these are there in all kinds of industry like mining, road building, railway, shipping, everywhere. And effectiveness of physical asset management is highly desired. We should see that they are used in the most effective manner. Now I come to the main point, that there are three views in which this physical asset management should be done. And these are the three broad views. The first one is the cost centered view, second one is the production capacity assurance view, and thirdly the strategic view. As I given in the very first title itself, that this is where I am going to concentrate, that is the strategic view, not really the cost centered view or the production capacity assurance view, but they are also very important. The first one, that is the cost centered view, one of the major cost is that of maintenance. But maintenance is something which we fail to realize the importance of it. Many a time we think that the maintenance is something which like a necessary evil. necessary evil, something like it's like a waste of time. Let's take an example of an airline industry. You see, if you take an airline industry, this airline industry operates in a certain manner. Let's take a new airline is coming up, alright, and these new airlines is going to give us tremendous facility and benefit. What kind of benefit? Maybe like some of the airlines in the recent past has done, they might be giving you very good on board or in flight, what you call food and comfort, right? Another airline, they may be focusing on low cost airlines. Some airlines, they may be focusing on timely service, that service is available and you reach on time. So that is their USP, ultimate the unique selling point. So there are several airlines with several specific advantages. Now look at the cost effective ones. Now question is that suppose the fare from here to Delhi is normally 7,000 rupees and somebody gives you a ticket at 2,000 rupees, you go for it because you can go at a very low cost. Like you are going for it, everyone would like to go for it. It's alright. What will happen at the end of it? These particular airlines will be very popular. Moment it becomes popular, naturally there will be force or pressure on this particular airline to increase its business. Then what it would like to do? It would like to have more flights. Is it not? More flights. Now the question is, one of the major difficulty is that number of planes are limited. Because buying a new aircraft is a tremendously time consuming process. You cannot buy a new aircraft every day. Even if you buy a new aircraft, it has to be commissioned. It should be given maintenance facility at all the airports. And you should have pilot and crew. They are not easy to get. So assuming that you are not immediately augmenting the number of planes, so the question that immediately comes, there will be pressure on flying the existing planes more. Till there is excess capacity, you can do it. At some point of time, the problem will be that these companies will feel that the maintenance is the problem, because you have to give certain amount of time for maintaining these aircrafts, and that particular time you feel is a waste, isn't it? But what could be the other side of the story? If you do not maintain, it may lead to catastrophe. Or if you are not very careful about how you maintain, there could be other kind of difficulties. So this particular fact that the maintenance is something like and necessary. I think we have gone one previous. So that's previous. So this is where we are. So what happens that maintenance costs are also increasing because of inflation and other things. So most, and I know it depends on more equipment you have, more these facilities you have, the maintenance costs are going to go up. So the question is, what is therefore required is a true and good maintenance planning. So I will come to that, what exactly it means, how maintenance planning is possible, and those details we shall see on some other day. Let's come to the other view, like production capacity assurance view. So as you can see, there is a particular term which is known as the overall equipment effectiveness, OEE. This OEE, this term will come back again and again, and as you see that I will actually look at it from a more mathematical point of view. So as you can see that OEE is three terms. What are those three terms? First one is the availability, second term is performance, and the third term is quality. And this is also connected with a term which is known as total productive maintenance or TPM. Right? Total productive maintenance is a concept which is a broad overall view towards the maintenance. What it is, some other day we shall see. Now, as you can see OEE, this is the definition. The first one is the availability. What is availability? Availability is defined the percentage of time for which particular machine is operated. So, see, any machine, it has to go down, right? If there is a problem, there is a snag. But after it goes down, does it become up automatically? It needs to be maintained. So what is downtime? Is the downtime only the time to maintain or something more? Is it only equal to repair time, the downtime, or something more? See, today is Monday. Suppose now it is afternoon, say around 5 o'clock, this machine fails. Right? If this machine fails, we need it tomorrow. Alright. Then we ask for maintenance. The maintenance person may not come immediately. He may say that it is 5 o'clock, so it's holiday already, I cannot come now. He comes tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and repairs it by 10 o'clock. So what is the downtime?
Waiting time is 1 hour.
Is it just 1 hour?
Because
Or it is the entire time for which the machine is not available?
because this machine is supposed to work for operating hours, right? Only.
Yeah, again you have to see another term he has very rightly said is the operating hours. What it means is that what is the time for which the machine is supposed to be operated. So what is the actual operating time loss? Right, that's the thing. But sometimes what happens, if a machine fails within the operating time itself, there is a time that requires before the maintenance crew comes and works on the machine. So that's the waiting time. So downtime usually is the repair time plus the waiting time. So proportion of uptime is the availability. Is it alright? That's about availability. The second thing is what is known as the performance rate. The performance rate, if you see, this is the total operating time, that means how much time is actually available with a ratio of the ideal cycle time. That means how much is the ideally is available for producing. Is that right? It is not the entire operating time is utilized for why? Because maybe jobs are not there, right? Maybe people are not available. Maybe there is some sort of allowances that is given. So that's why that ratio is taken. Along with we take the actual output. And finally the rejection percentages. Right? That's the quality. How much portion is available after taking care of the rejects. Is not? So output minus rejects by output is the quality. So the OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, is a term which actually takes care of all these three. Right? How much time is actually available, out of this available, how much time we are actually operating, and how much of that product is done in a proper manner. So these percentage, suppose I get an overall equipment effectiveness OEE of let's say 40%, that means out of the total plan, only 40% is effectively turned and going to the market. Is it not? That is now what you can actually sell. Rest is not available. So that's the thing about OEE. Now, what is basically to be done here is that that's the view that we try to look at the OEE and try to make or get a situation by which we maximize our overall equipment effectiveness. That's the second view. Now coming to the strategic view, the strategic view, as I said, is trying to get an overall integrated view and try to see things from a systemic point of view. Alright, try to see things on a systemic point of view, and that is the specific contention, as I said, I shall be covering and giving you examples, and later on, maybe next class, try to give an actual case study. And this particular case study is also related to the OEE. Alright, that's why that OEE explanation is also very important. These already in the first session we have discussed some of these examples, environment and safety related disasters. Therefore, it's required that we should also have a dynamic view of the system and look at it from a strategic point. So, some of the things that anyhow, something is wrong. A strategic view to asset management is possible by what is known as a closed loop feedback thinking. What is a closed loop feedback? I'll give an example, it will be clear to you. See, the closed loop feedback, let's directly go to a closed loop feedback example. I'll skip some slides. Just look at this closed loop feedback system. Try to understand this little carefully and look at this. I have taken from Business Dynamics by John D. Starbrand from this book, this particular example, and just have a look at it. What is really happening? So what is happening? Suppose you are doing some work, right? This work could be anything, maybe maintenance work or production work, right? There is a work pressure, what is known as the schedule pressure. What is schedule pressure? Schedule pressure you get when the time remaining is less and you have more work to do. See, this is also becomes particularly important for those type of work where there is a chance that you can do mistake and those mistakes are not discovered. Suppose you are doing some work very quickly. Suppose you have 100 work to do and time given is 2 months. 1 month is gone, you have done 50% work and you are very happy. Because another month you will do the remaining 50% work. Everything is fine. Now a review is done. The review finds that 10% of what you have done is wrong. So those 10% you have to do again. But how much rework is necessary for doing those 10%? Is it equal to 10%? It may be equal to 20%. That means your time remaining is 50%, work remaining is 70%. So you have time pressure. Alright? So when you have time pressure, then what you normally do, you start burning midnight oil. That's the first loop. As you can see, this B that is written there, it says, it means it's a balancing loop, or sometimes we call it's a negative loop, right? Why it is a negative loop? More is the pressure, more is the overtime, more will be completion rate, less will be your work remaining, and less will be schedule pressure. Yes or no? That is how you read it. Alright? So how you read it? Once again, suppose more is the pressure, schedule pressure, more overtime. More overtime, more work you complete. More work you complete, less is the work remaining. Less is the work remaining, less is the schedule pressure. So plus means whatever is the cause, the effect is also the same thing. So if more, then that is also more. If less, then the second one is also less. So you put some labels, more schedule pressure, more overtime because plus, more overtime, more completion rate because of plus, more completion rate, less work remaining because of minus, less work remaining, less schedule pressure because of plus. So more to more for plus, less to less for plus, more to less or less to more for minus. So what happens? Schedule pressure was more, it becomes less after one round, another the loop. But what is hidden in this loop is one round another the loop takes a certain amount of time. How much time? That depends on how much time is required to complete one loop. So alright, that's the mathematics, and it can also be done by simulation. Right? You can actually write those equations, go to computer, run it in a simulation package and get the results. Alright, so I'm not talking about simulation right now. I'm simply trying to tell you that what can happen when all these things are actually taking place. So what is the other kind of situation? Other situation is the second loop, which is known as burnout. Look here, what is burnout? It's R. R means reinforcing. Sometimes it is called a positive loop. So what can happen? That when there is overtime, there could be fatigue. When there is fatigue, the productivity will be going down. When the productivity is going down, your completion rate will also go down. That means less productivity, less completion rate. That's the thing, that although you do overtime, but you do not do much work because of fatigue. Alright, that's called the burnout, which is a reinforcing or a positive loop. You can do also another thing, which is called corner cutting. What is corner cutting? When there is more schedule pressure, you give less time to per task, right? By doing less time per task, you improve your productivity. So you do the work, but what happens by corner cutting? You complete the work, but not correct work. Complete the work, but wrong work. And this wrong work is the loop shown as haste makes waste. That is, more is the schedule pressure, less will be time per task because of corner cutting, and more will be error. More is the error, less will be productivity. Because as I gave that example, that you have done some wrong work which increases rework, and therefore you have more to do. And more to do, more is the pressure. So right. So this particular loop shows that when you have to do more work in less time, you try to work faster, but as you work faster, there is also things that you may be burned out, or you may start doing corner cutting. If you do start doing corner cutting, you actually create waste. Waste means you do erroneous work. It's alright. So these are the dynamics, and one thing leads to the other. Right? That's what we are calling as a strategic view, and which is the dynamics part of the thing. Now let's go back and tell some of the things. So let me give some more examples, some simple examples. This I skip. So this is one example, that what happens in the time I was talking about. That, see, look here, sometimes what happens, that we need perhaps more capacity, because without capacity we are not able to do what we wanted. It's alright. But this capacity decision that you have taken and the capacity that you get, it takes a time. See, look here, your capacity is less, so you want the capacity to go up. So you make some capacity decisions, give some capacity orders. In between, many things has to happen. You have to have money, you have to have a supplier, you have to give an order, the supplier has to supply. So it takes time. So, say for example, you have a project to do. This particular project you have to do within 1 year. And after working for 3 months, now you realize that you need a particular equipment. So you make efforts to buy that equipment, you actually place an order, but the actual machine comes after 6 months. So what happened? 9 months are already over. Is it not? So 3 months only left with that equipment to be commissioned, and you have to begin your work. So that is what it shows. That's we call the delay. That time that it requires actually makes a difference. Actually makes a difference. If you could reduce that 6 months to 2 months, let us say, you will get more time to work with the machine. Is that right? So that's about it. That yes, the gap can be breached, but at what point of time? Similarly, another example, I will not delve into it. See, these are positive feedback loops, like the reinforcing. Another example, that when there is a positive word of mouth, you have more sales, you have satisfied customers, you have more positive word of mouth. Now, let's see a very simple example of a positive feedback loop. Just look at this example, and I would ask you to draw some curves. A person buys some assets at year 0. The asset value appreciates in a manner that 10% of the available assets are added every year. The person sells a certain number of assets every year. Alright, draw the flow and the causal loop diagram and find the behavior modes. I'll make it very simple. Suppose you have retired and you have with you 10 lakh rupees. Is it not? Is it okay? You have 10 lakh rupees and you put this money in the bank. The bank is giving you 10% interest. Is it all right? Is it okay? So now that is your in. Alright. So how much can you spend per month? How much can you assume that inflation is 0 for the time being? There is no inflation. You have 10 lakh rupees with you, and the bank is giving you simple interest for the time being. You take, say, compound interest 10% per year. How much can you spend per month or per year? If you spend 10,000 per year, then not 10,000, 1 lakh per year, then incoming equal to outgoing. So your asset is only 10,000. Is it okay? Is it a good thing? It's not a good thing, because there is also inflation. There is also inflation. Is it not? So you actually want your asset should grow at least at the rate of inflation. Is it not? So suppose just take a low inflation, something like a 4% inflation, a 5% inflation. Alright, then what should be the value? Is the question clear? See, there is an inflation.
So inflation is 5%, right? And
Inflation is
interest
5%, and you are getting 10%
So effective
per year.
positive percent, and this positive growth is 5%.
5%.
So you cannot spend more than 5%.
More than 5%. So, but then it is also not that good, because even if you spend 5,000, you are not taking that there could be inflation for your spending also. So you cannot even spend 5,000, because if you start spending 5,000 now and every year 5,000 now and 5,000 after 10 years are not exactly same. Is it not? So you should also see that you spend at an even lower rate, so that there is an increase in your spending, and your money, that 10 lakh that you have in the bank, that should sustain you for a number of years. Is that right? So you see, here is a tool which can actually help you in doing this kind of studies. So this is a very simple diagram to begin with. You can make it more and more complicated by bringing more and more such factors. Is that right? So exactly what I am trying to tell you, that here is a subject which is known as system dynamics, which helps you in do those things by very simple diagramming method. All of these can actually be written by differential equations, but we are not writing differential equations right now. We are simply trying to tell you that you can do it. Is that right? So I am just showing you through pictorial methods, and in fact the software also takes these pictures. Right? In a software you can actually do this, draw these pictures, and you can actually get those results. So please look at this. This is what is the behavior. This is a picture from the software Stella. Then here you see that the assets are at a zero level when you start spending at a same rate as 10%. But if it is lower, then it shows an exponential plot, and the assets become zero maybe within 11-12 years, and if otherwise the assets grow at an exponential manner. So basically what is the point I am trying to show here is that when there is a reinforcing loop or a positive loop, there is an exponential growth or an exponential decline. So I am differentiating the words decline and decay. Decline means where the curve is this type, it's actually coming and touching the zero at a quicker rate, right? With every passing years it becomes faster. That's what I am calling as decline. Alright, so that's the kind of vicious loops. Say I'll give an example of a vicious loop. Suppose you are earning certain amount of money. This is alright, but your expenditure is more. So what will you do? How will you bridge this gap? By taking loan. As you take loan, your interest you have to pay, and your debt is going up. As you pay interest, your expenditure increases further. As your expenditure increases further, your debt grows. You have to take even more loan. Isn't it? So what happens? It creates one thing leads to the other. It creates a vicious loop, and your condition is declining in this manner, okay? Positive exponential manner. So you are quickly declining. But more important thing is it's a process, and that's what you should understand. All these things I am trying to tell you because you know that process view should be actually understood. What is process view? Process view is, let us say now a particular person who is under that vicious loop, falling in a very rapid manner. Now you come and try to help him. How do you help? That's very important. You are helping by giving that person money. Let us say his total debt is 5,000, say 5 lakh rupees. You say fine, I will write off your entire 5 lakh rupees. I will give, you now have zero debt. Alright. So you pay off all his 5 lakh rupees. His debt becomes zero. Have you really helped the person? What you actually have done, you have delayed his final outcome. Isn't it? Because you could not make a change in the process. The process remains the same. The intervention that you have done, you have simply written off his debt for the time being. That means his condition has momentarily improved. But again, because his income is less than his expenditure, he is in the vicious loop. He is in the negative spiral. Alright, I mean not really negative spiral, positive downward spiral, negative spiral is something else. So positive downward spiral, which is the decline, and sooner or later he will again find himself in the same stage. Is alright. The question is, if therefore this is a vicious loop, the answer lies elsewhere. The answer lies in changing the process. Answer line is doing something so that this positive loop is actually cut off. How this positive loop can be cut off? By see that the income versus expenditure gap is not there. Or the person cannot take loan anymore. That means that he has to therefore be put a pressure, either increase your income or decrease your expenditure. That is the true intervention. That means cut off the loop. It's alright. That is what is called a structural change. See, the basic thing, let me go back once again. There are two basic yes. See, here you see that there are two axioms I have spoken. Okay. There are two axioms I have spoken of. Yes, there are two axioms I have spoken of. The first axiom is structure is made up of feedback loops. And the second axiom, which is also very important, is the behavior is a function of system structure. That means if you want a true change in the system behavior, you change the system structure. How do you can make a true change in the structure? By changing the loops or changing the feedback structures. That means if there is a vicious loop, identify it and break it. But the question is, how to break it? Where to intervene? That is where the question actually lies, that if we need to intervene somewhere, we should know where to intervene. Is that right? So some examples, let me show. So similarly, like I gave you an example of the positive feedback loop, you can also have an example of the negative feedback loop. Similarly, you can have, and you can actually see that these curves are goal seeking curves, means they tend to stabilize. They tend to stabilize. If there is a negative loop, they are also called the balancing loop. Sometimes we write a B. Alright. And these balancing loops essentially tries to make a negative exponential curve, which, as you can look, they are trying to get stabilized at some value. So sometimes they are also called goal seeking. So every negative feedback loop actually has a goal, right? And it tries to reach that goal. Apparently, sometimes some negative feedback loops, they do not have any goal, so they are called zero goal seeking. Say for example, these radioactive decays or the depreciation of assets, right? Depreciation of assets, let us say, that also follows the same principle in a negative feedback loop. The essential idea is the value of the asset is falling over the time, and that is called depreciation. It is getting depreciated at a certain rate. There are many depreciation methods. One such method is called declining balance depreciation method. So what really happens? The asset value falls rapidly at first, and slowly that fall is reduced. So this also shows the same negative exponential curve, and it actually tries to reach the value of 0 in a negative exponential manner, because there is a balancing loop present there. This is alright. The rate of change of the asset value is dependent on the remaining asset value. Right? More is the remaining asset value, more is the depreciation. More is the depreciation, less is the remaining asset value. So it creates a negative feedback loop or a balancing feedback loop whose behavior pattern is negative exponential and which is also called goal seeking, and in this particular case the goal is 0, trying to reach the value of 0. Alright. Now I will come to the next part where try to see, as I said, that all of these concepts, whatever I am trying to give you today, this is slightly more advanced, let's not talk about this. All of these, we actually are going to discuss with a case study, that is next time I shall take. As I said, this is related to overall equipment effectiveness and how an overall equipment effectiveness actually changes the organizational maintenance behavior. Right? That's what we shall discuss in the next class. Now, see, there are several system structures which can be called as templates. They are called the system archetypes. So what are archetypes? Archetypes are some, like I said. See, let's go back to once again what I said. I said that there is a structure, and structure is coming out of feedback loops, and there is behavior which is a function of structure. So see, look here, we want a particular behavior. It is like saying we want a particular structure. Alright. So let us now see what are some structures or structure templates which are commonly found in industries and elsewhere or service situations, of which one should be aware of. Right? One should be aware of, or you may call, they are like pitfalls. One should be aware of such pitfalls, and one should see that we also don't fall prey to those sort of things. That's alright. So there are some examples, there are many, I have just listed 4. So these are maybe fixes that fail, shifting the burden, limits to success, and finally the growth and under investment. So these are the 4 structures or systems archetypes which we can discuss. If you want to know more, then you can read the 5th discipline, The Art and Practice of Learning Organization by Peter M. Senge. See, look here, this is one example, that is fixes that fail. So you have a problem and you have a fix. Fix is what? Is a quick solution. Alright? You have to solve the problem, but you could not solve the problem, so you just fixed it. Alright? So this fix, what kind of long-term impact it can actually make. Alright? That's the example you can see here, that the problem, more is the problem, more is the fix. And this fix actually solves the current situation, so the problem is alleviated. Alright, that's the balancing part. But since you have used a fix, that fix is actually going to create an unintended side effects. And these side effects would worsen the current situation and therefore worsen the problem. And the fix, you need a bigger fix next time. Is it not? A bigger fix next time. Can you give some example? Think of some exercise, some of these simple things. See, even plain and simple cycle. If you are moving on cycle, there is a tire, there is a tube. Is it okay? Your tube is not good, getting punctured repeatedly, but you are not changing the tube. Tire is more costly than the tube. Is it not? But since you are not changing the tube, you are still persisting by, going to the repairman and correcting the puncture, your tire health is going down. The time will come when you have to change the tire and the tube both. Normal sequences, you may have to change only the tube, tire may have more life, but because you have not done that, you persisted with the same tube, what has happened? Now you have to change both tire as well as tube. Alright, so this is one example that what may happen if you keep on using the fix. Alright, that's an example of fixes that fail. Now, so this is actually written there. Some of the examples, like here, I was talking about this, that borrow money to make payments. So you see, you have a monetary crisis, that is a cash problem. So you borrow money to take care of the monetary crisis. But since you are borrowing money, your debt situation becomes worse and it will create further monetary crisis and further cash problem. Is that right? So it's just a simple example that how fixes are going to create further problems. This is another example, like you see, cutback maintenance to save operating costs. So monetary problem is taken care of for the time being, but it after a delay it will create a bigger maintenance problems which will lead to more costs in the long run. Alright, so it is a very reality that I know that, yes.
So
Yes.
based on these diagram, we can make our strategy, right? Whether
Yes.
we should do a maintenance prior or we can delay it on, so which will be beneficial.
It
How to make
depends
decision
on
out of it.
depends on your situation. It simply tells this diagram that these are the likely consequences that can happen. It's alright that if you actually if you cut back maintenance to, you know, reduce, don't try to keep the operating cost at a low level, this could be the likely scenario. That's what it says.
So
But your given situation where you have those maintenance problem, how you are going to tackle your maintenance problem, it has to be analyzed from a completely separate way in a proper manner. Is alright. That's some of the things I will discuss in our maintenance, that is next week. But at this point, what exactly it tells us that if this is what you are doing in your organization, then be aware that you are doing it. See,
This
most
is
of
just
us,
like say listing all the parameters of what if.
yes,
But
but the point is, see, look here, it is listing, that's true. But many a time we are actually doing it without realizing.
Yeah.
So this diagram simply tells us that are we doing like this? Let us examine ourselves. Are our existing situation something like this? If it is so, then it's not good. That's what it says, right? So that's what we should be aware of. But what could be the solution? That is not so simple. That you have to work out. Okay, so this is the diagram which actually shows that how it happens, that this problem, see, every time you apply the fix, the problem symptom becomes less, but the unintended consequence actually goes up. So next time when the problem symptom appears, the problem symptom is even higher, right? So it actually goes up and up because the unintended consequences are also going up and up. The next one is the shifting the burden. So let's get an example directly. So see, for example, when there is a problem situation, there is a fundamental solution somewhere and there is a symptomatic solution which is like a quick solution or like a fix. So what happens, this is one step further, that every time you use a symptomatic solution such as a fix, you solve the problem situation, but it actually creates unintended side effects and makes it the fundamental solution weaker. Alright, and therefore that fundamental solution that would have made the problem situation better, but it takes time before the fundamental solution can be developed. So basically it says that suppose for a given situation there is a good solution, but it will take some time. So since that you are really working not on the fundamental solutions, you are deferring it, you are actually using the fixed or the symptomatic solutions. What happens? The very fact that you keep on using symptomatic solutions, the side effects will make your fundamental solution more weak. Means now you need even more effort to go into those fundamental solutions. Is it alright? So today, like, we were interviewing a person for our master degree program, and we asked him a simple question on derivatives or maxima and minima. Alright. So he could not answer it. So he said that I have neglected class 11, 12 due to some reason, and when I came to class engineering, that time it was at a higher level. Now you see, if he is taken in the master's level, the master's degree is at an even higher level. So when he has the time to correct himself about his lack of knowledge on maxima and minima and derivatives that he neglected in class 11, 12. It's not really, time is not there. So it makes even worse. Now when even bigger things are being told to him, and with his lack of knowledge of even class 11, 12 things, it would be even more difficult for him. Yes, no? That's the basic point we are trying to make. So just we'll complete this portion and then we stop for today. See, there are two examples let me give. See, for example, that when you have low productivity in a given situation, many a time we sometimes think that if we simply increase manpower, the problem will go away. Right? But it has been seen, particularly in the capital intensive industries, particularly today, just increasing manpower has never been the solution. The solution always lies in process improvement. Right? So if you simply increase manpower, what may happen? The product quality will suffer. And when product quality suffers, the process improvement becomes even more difficult. Is alright. So here the idea is that you have low productivity, the solution lies in process improvement, and you are trying to solve the problem by increasing manpower for the time being. The effect, the product quality has suffered and your process improvement becomes even more far-fetched. It takes even more time. So that's the thing, that shifting the burden means you have shifted the burden of process improvement to symptomatic solutions such as increasing manpower, but it creates a secondary effect called product quality, which is suffering, and problem is even more. So this is our last example. See what happens, that this is about the need for information technology and computerization. So there is an increased need of computerization, the IT needs. So what happens, most of us, we are simply outsourcing in a mindless manner to external companies. So when we do that, the fundamental capacity of developing the IT expertise in-house is worsening. Because what happens, every time we outsource, we are going to have reduced IT capability. Isn't it? With the reduced IT capability, that means the expertise inside is lesser and lesser. So as this happens, the IT expertise becomes less and less, and this increased IT needs has to be, you become more and more dependent to your outsource partner. Alright? And as it very commonly known, that the outsource partners are going to arm twist. Alright, so that arm twisting will go on and it creates a further worse situation. Alright, so I stop here because already I have crossed 5 extra minutes. Rest of the things I will continue with the example that I spoke of in our next class. Okay, that is day after tomorrow. If there is any question, yes.
Outsourcing actually.
Yes.